Welcome back to the Ball and Breakfast podcast. I'm Patrick Miller alongside Wayne Pois. We're bringing you a new edition of Ball and Breakfast podcast, kind of covering football this time. We've done, deep dives into the NBA. Playoffs are ongoing right now. You can check out our latest episodes on the Eastern Conference and Western Conference first round playoff predictions. I think it's best if you go to Instagram first. If you're on that social media channel, you can find our link tree URL in our profile, and that'll get you to YouTube. It'll get you to all of our podcast channels, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Anchor. You can find us all over the place. But we really appreciate you guys following us wherever we are, subscribing, liking anything we're doing, or commenting on how you feel, or just start up a conversation with us or others. Just try to get a debate going on some of the stuff we're putting out there. I mean, I don't know if Wayne and I are exact, geniuses or anything like that, but, we like to be tested, and we like to, hear what's going on. So without further ado, looking at, April 28th, a Thursday, is the NFL draft. For me personally, it's something that, I always like to track just to know, going into the new football year, fantasy football season, just kind of understanding, which rookies are really going to be, making an impact, who can be guys that are, franchise cornerstones. And then, also when you're watching the draft, there's always going to be that blunder pick, or, perhaps that blunder mega trade that just, sends you into, complete shivers or a nightmare or something like that. And, as Bears fans, Wayne and I, we'll touch on one, but in general, should be fun. And to kind of set that up for the next two Thursdays from now, we're going to talk about the best and worst draft day trades that we've kind of ever really experienced. And, we'll break down the players involved, the picks, and just kind of the ramifications of what happens. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne to kick it off with one of the best draft day trades he's ever seen.
Yeah. Thanks, Pat. Yeah. So maybe not ever seen, but have read about and studied. I'm going to go a little retro here. For my first best draft day trades, I'm going to go with probably the best player ever in the NFL, apart from probably Tom Brady, right? Jerry Rice, 49ers, back in 1985. They heard some rumblings that the Dallas Cowboys were going to draft Jerry Rice. The 49ers moved up from 28 to 16, giving up a second rounder, and then swapping the first and the third round picks there. So, just thinking about it, it's like worth that gamble for sure. Getting Jerry Rice, probably definitely easily the best wide receiver of all time, winner of 3 Super Bowls, Super Bowl MVP, 13-time Pro Bowl selection, most receiving anything, yards, receptions, TDs, by a lot. So, for me, it was like kind of doing a little bit of research here. Is like, oh yeah, the Niners completely won this trade. I don't really have to look at whoever the Cowboys got. I don't think. But yeah, nothing can compete, I think, with Jerry Rice just balling out after the 1985 draft there. He actually ran a 4.740 to all the 40-time people out there. 40 times it's great and all that, but it's also important to be a good route runner and being explosive, at the line of scrimmage, all that out of Mississippi Valley State. So, really balled out. If you look at his college stats, they're actually pretty ridiculous. Definitely not a Alabama SEC type of thing, right? So, but yeah, have to give my props to Jerry Rice doing a little bit of throwback there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, to kind of just take him away from the Cowboys is probably the biggest part of that, because it just kind of felt like with where the Cowboys were going in that era and kind of moving into the 90s, what Jerry Rice could have been on the Cowboys with, perhaps Aikman, perhaps Michael Irvin, who would have known, but maybe a couple more championships would have came to Dallas in that situation. But also kind of interesting that coming out of Mississippi Valley State, how he was being kind of I don't know, evaluated or just kind of known or analyzed in that time as being, somebody that was a must-have for that draft. So, I feel like sometimes these stars that break out from smaller schools, you never really saw them coming in a way. Like I feel like, maybe a Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman just would have completely fallen off the radar. But, in the same sense, like, I guess the scouts were there and they, were sending good enough word to, teams to let them know about Jerry. And he definitely, lived up to his billing.
Yeah, and you got to think about kind of even like this NFL draft and see like who are the small school people. I know some GMs out there, Ryan Pace, can sometimes get a little cutesy with like some of the small school people. We saw with like Adam Shaheen, and some other ones too. So, but we'll see what happens this coming draft. I know there's a lot of fans talking about the Bears fans talking about Christian Watson out of North Dakota State. So. But yeah, it's like who can really measure the heart and athleticism and skill set necessary from the smaller skills, see if it translates into, big time football. That's certainly is where the good scouts come in, and the Niners definitely, Hall of Famer Bill Walsh was like, yeah, we need to get this guy. So, props to them for taking that gamble.
Yeah, no doubt. And, it kind of seems like over time there's been, especially at the quarterback position, there's been a lot of choices that have come out of kind of obscure schools, looking at a Joe Flacco or Carson Wentz or, now it's like a Trey Lance and even, Malik Willis in this year's draft is like kind of starting to fly up the, draft boards in the first round or what have you. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, now there's just game tape everywhere and, anybody can be, the next NBC or Fox or ESPN or whatever else, just with their mobile phones. So
and Roethlisberger too. That was I think he came out of Miami, Ohio, or something like that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. No, so no, it's a good pick. I mean, obviously, it's a good clear choice as a trade that happened during the draft for arguably the best receiver of all time.
For sure.
So I guess, kind of sticking on the positives, I'll just, pull mine. In the transfer of players in this draft and this actual trade and during this draft were, they produced Pro Bowlers for both sides, two guys that were, franchise cornerstones. And it's the 2004 NFL draft. I've got the best trade going to the New York Giants for grabbing Eli Manning after a trade with the San Diego Chargers of the time, who are now the LA Chargers. But Phillip Rivers went back. So did a third-round pick in the same year draft that ended up producing kicker Nate Kading. And then in 2005, they also got a first-round pick, which was Sean Lights Out Merriman, who was just really a standout. Edge rusher. He was I guess they said he was fifth all-time in sacks in his first 3 years out of college. So, that's pretty notable. And he had 3 Pro Bowls to start off his career. Also notable, I know his tenure in the bigs didn't last as long as most projected. I think he played about 10 years, but he was definitely an impact player and one that got the Chargers of that time to a conference championship with LaDainian Tomlinson is still on the roster, and Drew Brees was also on that roster too for the Chargers when they made that trade. So it's like, kind of looking at the writing on the wall when, Manning found out that he was going to get drafted. He, the word is his dad kind of, talked him out of it, but he swears against it. He says, it was more his agent at the time and, his own impressions. He also looked at the situation and said, look, like the Chargers drafted Ryan Leaf in 98, complete bust. Drew Brees had a really tough time getting going out there. So, he was a little bit against just, finding himself in that same unlucky situation. And, at the time, I think everybody looked at Eli as kind of a, brat. And, he kind of was because, his dad was Archie and his brother's Peyton. And he just has this look on his face. And I mean, I was never a big Eli guy, to be honest with you. It's kind of like, you could kind of see he was kind of smug. But it was good for the Giants. I mean, they were looking at Eli, and they honestly said they would have gone with Big Ben at that same pick had they not had confidence that they could pull off a trade with the Chargers. So the story, just how the story could have been written in a lot of different ways is interesting and just like kind of fun to think about with, 3 arguably Hall of Fame quarterbacks, all in different situations. But,
Yeah.
we know the Eli story. He won in 08, he won in 12 with teams that were wild card, playing kind of teams. They were 10-6 and 9-7, having won the championships. And, we always remember the David Tyree catch in 08 to knock off the undefeated Patriots. And then in 12, the big catch by Mario Manningham, and just defense firing on all cylinders for the Giants. I mean, arguably they helped win those championships too. But do you have any reactions to that best trade or just those players involved?
Yeah, no, I mean it would have been interesting though. Yeah, like you were talking about, the players that the Chargers got, right? Like those are some quality players that led to some championship runs. I think they went to a conference championship or something along those lines. So like those players really made an impact. But then it's like, yeah, you can't really knock on not too much, like I guess on the Giants too, because they won a couple of Super Bowls with Eli. So granted, it's like you look at the stats, right? I think Phillip Rivers kind of trumps Eli Manning's stats some. So that being said, it is funny that we talk about Archie and the Manning family. It's like the Ball family in the NBA in a way, like is LeVar Ball basically Archie Manning, like talking like, oh yeah, this guy's got to go to the Lakers and all that when Lonzo was coming out. So, no, I like the analysis you provided. Talking about Sean Merriman and everything. People sometimes forget about him and his impact. He was kind of like how Khalil Mack was like back in the heyday, right? So very much that impact sack master, and those are hard to get. So yeah, really like that. And interesting enough, yeah, now we're seeing them moving to LA. I wonder what would have happened, if the San Diego Chargers were in LA at the time, like they are now. Like would Archie be like, yeah, let's go through, because hey, LA is not too bad of a place too. So and I love Eli Manning now as a kind of a comedic relief from Peyton Manning in the Monday Night Football cast. So can appreciate him there. But yeah, it was a good trade, I think, probably for both parties overall. So
yeah, the other thing I'll add is just the amount of passing involved in today's game, going to the mid 2000s and onward. It's like you look at the top 10 list for most touchdowns, most passing yards all time. And it's kind of funny, but you'll see Eli in the top 10 for both of those. You'll see Phillip Rivers in the top 10 for both of those. And it's like, sometimes I really think about like, who are the greatest quarterbacks of all time? And I don't initially think of Eli or Phillip Rivers just based on like passing the eye test or like what we think of when we think of greatness. But in a lot of ways, those guys were prolific in a very like, for Eli, very quiet. And then Phillip, it was just, he was a loudmouth. He was somebody who was going to bark at you throughout the entire game. And it's kind of, well documented on YouTube for having some really funny, video compilations for that. But he was outspoken, but the same way as his game was kind of, it was kind of underappreciated, I'd say, because you just didn't see him, on the face, as the face of any sort of NFL promotion or on the cover of any sort of game. It was just a Brady Manning league at that time. So it was just really hard to break through in that sense.
Yeah. And, like it's interesting to think about Breeze and Rivers on the same team, right? Like, could you imagine the backfield? Not to say that Rivers again was not a bad, like he was a terrible quarterback or anything like that, but you think about Breeze and his impact, Hall of Famer, all the passing yards he's accumulated, the Super Bowl in New Orleans. So it's like, could you imagine him and LaDainian Tomlinson like at their peaks? Like, man, that is crazy to think about. And then yeah, what would happen if they were like, yeah, let's stick around with this Drew Brees kid. Let's see if he still has it. Granted, it made sense, because I know he was going through some arm issues, right? So that was the whole thing. It was like, hey, yeah, we did draft Phillip Rivers, and yeah, this Breeze guy, we don't know if he's going to be able to throw. So I can't fault them for that, but man, that would have been an awesome backfield.
Yeah, Breeze staying on. I mean, think of just I mean, even San Diego not drafting Rivers with that pick and maybe getting like another playmaker to just go around with Tomlinson and then a recovered Breeze or something. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of scenarios just kind of go through my head with the amount of talent that like got transferred in this trade. But just a fun one to look back at. But I guess to round it off, what would you say is your third, best trade in a draft that you remember?
Yeah, so I had Walter Jones, actually, the Walter Jones, left tackle for the Seattle Seahawks. Shout out to all the Seattle people out there, having lived there for 6 years. So, but yeah, like Walter Jones, I'll talk about him as a player, and then I'll talk about the draft day trade itself. But he was played in the NFL for, I think, 12 or 13 years, more than a decade, started every single game. You talk about a left tackle, probably the second most important position in the NFL, next to quarterback, right? Played every single game at a high level, 9-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro. So yeah, during the 1997 NFL draft, the Seahawks traded their third round pick and swapped their first rounders. There's the 12th pick to the 6th pick, traded up for Walter Jones there. Tampa Bay, actually, the team that they traded with, actually ended up picking Warrick Dunn, who had a good career. Not left tackle, all pro, every single game type of player like Walter Jones was. And then actually after Warrick Dunn was Tony Gonzalez, actually. So, a lot of great talent in this draft, but Walter Jones at a left tackle and being that staple for more than a decade, like that's what you want out of a first round pick, right? Especially a left tackle. So, I had to give props to the Seattle Seahawk there at the left tackle. Got to give props to the big guys. If you have a good line, you can do a lot of great things there. And Seahawks had a Super Bowl run in there too with Walter Jones there at left tackle. So yeah, had to give him props for that and that pick. So yeah, what are your thoughts on my selection of Walter Jones, a good old fashioned left tackle at that in there?
Yeah, it's it's underappreciated again. It's like, Sean Alexander could run for 1,500 yard seasons and nobody would really know Walter Jones is the one, paving the way for him, or maybe it's a Marshawn Lynch, or it's just protecting the quarterback, Hasselbeck into, Russell Wilson and such. So it's like, nobody really will point him out and say, that's the guy, unless you're playing, Madden and he's ranked 99 every single year, which is probably what he was throughout his career. But, he was a household name for offensive linemen. Like, all of us casual fans, even those that are kind of, diehards or what have you, it's like, you may know the name or you may not because you're just kind of focused on quarterbacks or wide receivers. But at the end of the day, when they shine a light on his career, I think most people acknowledge him for being a great offensive lineman and just kind of, doing what he did for 12 seasons. But it's a bit unfair. I wish today's game, would do more to, kind of get these guys in the spotlight, because it really is a battle of the trenches. Like when you look at just O lines and D lines and things like that. I mean, I think, nowadays with quarterbacks getting, so much protection from the referees, maybe offensive linemen have taken like a slight bump down because they're just in general, quarterback can't really get touched no matter what. But in the same sense, I mean, I just feel like, it'd be nice if, I think ESPN does a thing on pancakes now, just kind of showing, the top blocks and things like that. But I don't know. Do you have anything else to add just in terms of the game or how linemen are perceived?
That's a great, I'm glad you brought that all up. And then it's like, I think somebody did an analysis on this, like on Twitter, I saw it was like the top 10 quarterbacks get obviously paid the most and have the highest impact on salary cap. But now thanks to some recent signings like Christian Kirk and all the Jaguars, wide receiver now is the second most paid position now. Yeah, so I know it used to be, I think, left tackle, but now it's wide receiver. Again, to your point, like it seems like it's much more about it's kind of taking up a little bit of a back seat there with regards to, I guess, how teams are prioritizing. They're like, okay. With how quarterbacks are getting I guess coddled, with the penalties and all. It's like, okay, now I think we can maybe shift a little bit more of our funding and our priorities towards wide receivers and to tight ends a little bit more now. So yeah, it is a passing league, but yeah, you still need some offensive linemen there, and also, like, hey, Tom Brady didn't have too many wide receivers. I think that during his time, I actually think that was a pretty good hack, I guess, from Bill Belichick, was getting tight ends, since I guess they just don't require as much money. So, getting Gronkowski and that guy Aaron Hernandez too, and all of that. So, I certainly think that that kind of thing has made an impact, and then getting offensive linemen, for the Patriots, that might have been their way of going about it, kind of the workaround with all that. So, but offensive linemen definitely impactful, definitely, I guess, underappreciated, for your modern NFL fans. But we hear you guys. So yeah, and I think actually our linemen actually have the best GPAs in college football, if I'm not mistaken, like on average. So smart people too, and the Bears got one for a GM, so hopefully he's really, really smart. So yeah.
Well, all good points, definitely. And, we're crossing our fingers that Tevin Jenkins can be the next, Walter Jones in that sense.
Yeah. So who do you got next on your list now?
So next on my list, we're gonna flip the script a little bit. We talked about all the happy and, warm-hearted feelings towards good trades, but we're going to go toward the dark side. I'm going to bring up the first one that I think is just an atrocity, and it's for the Minnesota Vikings of 1989. So the Wayback Machine is now open. I think I was 2 years old. I'm assuming Wayne, was born, around, that time. It was, probably in diapers or something like that. But, looking at the time, the trade was that Dallas sent over running back Hershel Walker, who at that time was 26 years old. He was a two-time Pro Bowler at that point. Minnesota had been second place in their division, had a pretty good winning record, and thought to themselves, okay, we get this running back, and this is just going to put us over the top. Like, we have all the pieces in place. We just need to, slam this thing home. So they bring over Hershel Walker, and in the process, they trade 6 defensive players of theirs, as well as giving up 5 draft picks in the draft. So just a ton of capital, both on the defensive side of their current team, and then just pretty much their entire future for the next few seasons. So unfortunately for Minnesota, his tenure in Minnesota ended in 2 years. He never had more than 1,000 yards rushing. And in that time, just getting to 1,000 yards was probably everything for the running back. I mean, they weren't as involved in the passing game. They weren't going to get the 80 receptions that we now see from a McCaffrey or a Kamara. So he just truly underwhelmed in that time for them. And, on the other side of it, I was kind of going through and, checking the box with all names, but, as far as who Dallas got, as far as actual rostered players from Minnesota, they brought over linebacker Jesse Solomon, D-back Isaiah Colt, running back Darren Nelson, linebacker David Howard, and D-end Alex Stewart. All these guys didn't really mount up to being primetime players for them. Their DB, Holt, ended up being on one of their Super Bowl teams in 1993. But the main players that Dallas got back were through the draft, and it ended up producing Emmitt Smith, who we all know is probably, arguably the best running back of all time, over 20,000 all-purpose yards, 175 total touchdowns, is second all time. Just an absolute stud. And he also got safety Darren Woodson, who had 5 Pro Bowls, a 3-time All-Pro, and still holds the record for most tackles for the Dallas Cowboys. They got defensive tackle Russell Maryland, who was part of their 3 Super Bowl titles. He got to 1 Pro Bowl as a D tackle. And they also had a cornerback named Kevin Smith, who was also part of one of their championship seasons. So, you just kind of look at the haul and kind of the culture change that was brought to Dallas through that very impactful trade. And looking at Minnesota, they never advanced throughout the playoffs with Hershel Walker in those 2 brief seasons. He ended up finding his way back to Dallas later in his career too, which is kind of just like insult to injury in my opinion. But I was just thinking about this trade. In general, I have some questions, but do you have any initial reactions to everything you're hearing?
I mean, you kind of said it all. And honestly, like this trade has its own Wikipedia, which I think says it all. Like this was definitely, I guess, a kind of a one-sided trade here that was just so epic. So I think it's like one of those things that's like it's like right up there with like the Bobby Bonilla day type of thing, right? Where Bobby Bonilla gets $1 million every year for like 30 years or something. Like it's one of those like, did that actually happen type of thing? But it did, and yeah, this really set up the groundwork, I think, yeah, for the Dallas Cowboys of the '90s and made them America's team. So kudos, yeah. I don't know who kudos to Jerry Jones really for like I guess greenlighting all that. So really great drafts. And I think this kind of really shows like the idea. Like, could you actually imagine this of trading all those picks for today, like a running back, like that would be interesting.
No, and that's kind of where I was going to go with it. I was going to kind of set you up, but I was thinking to myself, like, who could be a good comp for the Minnesota Vikings of 1988? And like, what if we're talking Buffalo Bills of this year? And Alvin Kamara's out there. The Saints, could be a 500 team again. They could be in the mix, perhaps, but. What if Buffalo said to, they go to New Orleans and they say, hey, we'll give you, six players. I mean, they'd probably have to be low impact defensive players or something like that, but then say, we'll set you up with 5 really nice draft picks moving forward. If you're Buffalo first, do you consider something like that? You get Alvin Kamara and maybe that's just a slam dunk. In your mind, you're winning the Super Bowl this year, but, would you think about it?
Well, you better win the Super Bowl if you're going to do that. I mean, I think that's just what's been proven. With not to always talk about the Bears and their strategies, but that's why you got to build through the draft. I feel like, sure, yeah, if you're like one piece away from from that championship glory, kind of like what the Rams did, great. But you got to be in that position to go all crazy or go all YOLO about it, right? But yeah, if I'm the Bills, for a running back in particular, that's where it's just not a thing. And I get it was during that time where running backs were like the cornerstone of offenses, which today like that's that's not true at all. I think I was talking about that list before about that position, top 10 positions and salaries. I think running backs were actually last on there now. So. Probably except positional players, not like kicker, punters, and all that, or long snappers. So, yeah, that's definitely where it's like the running back position has just completely been devalued. You also think about the Ricky Williams trade as well, where the Saints got rid of traded their entire draft basically for one player, right? So, again, in today's NFL, that would just be unheard of. So, but yeah, even then. The impact that trade had for the Dallas Cowboys, holy cow! That's such a crazy trade that happened, and yeah, we still talk about it. So
for sure. How about you? Do you have a bad one to bring up?
Yeah, I got one here from probably the most known, infamously known second overall pick, just because of how good the first pick was and how bad this player was. But I'm gonna go back to the 1998 NFL draft. I think you know where I'm going with this. Ryan Leaf, Chargers moved up one spot, kind of like how the Bears did a little bit here, but it was actually a little bit worse if you look at it. Moved from 3 to 2 the 1998 draft, swapped the first rounders there, gave up a second rounder in the same draft. And then also gave up the next year's first round as well, which ended up being the 8th overall pick. And yeah, they swapped or they traded with the Cardinals. So, and then the same year too, the year out, I guess after the draft, the Cardinals actually won their first playoff game in 61 years as well. So the Cardinals actually did pretty well. And then the Chargers were pretty infamous, I think, after that. But then I think that led to some high draft picks for them, and they landed some good people there. So I think that eventually landed them Mike Vick, and then they swapped with the Atlanta Falcons for LaDainian Tomlinson. So I guess you want to look at it in that aspect, maybe, I guess. And then I think that same draft for LaDainian Tomlinson, they also got Drew Brees. So maybe it did kind of work out in a way, but obviously they didn't win the whole thing, and eventually Brees left, and they drafted Phillip Rivers, and we just went over all that stuff. So, but yeah, Chargers didn't really do so much with Ryan Leaf. We can always talk about Ryan Leaf a bunch. He's doing a lot better, I think, actually, as a commentator / podcaster. Listened to a couple of stuff, very, very, kind of deep, and he did a lot of soul searching afterwards. So, can't fault him too much on this. He sounds like he's doing a lot better than what he was when he came into the NFL. But then, the Cardinals, they got some pretty decent talent. Didn't win a Super Bowl or anything like that, but did get David Boston, actually, with that 8th pick in the 1999 first round that they got from this trade. David Boston had a pretty decent career, ran into some injuries, but had a 1,500-yard season in there. Had Eric Metcalf, one of the best special teamers, linebacker Patrick Sapp, and then with that swap pick, they got Andre Wadsworth, who had a good rookie season, for that playoff team, but ran into some injuries, and that really kind of curtailed his career. I think he's like a pastor now, and also / pod. I feel like everybody's a podcaster. I think he's also a podcaster as well. So, all in all, not the best trade for the Chargers, but the Cardinals, they had I guess an okay haul for what it was worth, and hit some playoff glory there. So, what are your thoughts on this trade with Ryan Leaf?
Yeah, in that same draft, who was the top court? Was it the Peyton Manning draft?
It was the Peyton Manning draft. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's kind of like, I mean, if you're the second guy up to Peyton Manning, it's like, you're kind of Sam Bowie of the Portland Trailblazers. It's just like, unfortunately, you got to follow, the active Peyton Manning. But Ryan Leaf seemed like he just had his head screwed on wrong. From the very start. I think we all remember the infamous blow up at the reporter over the course of the season and how he was playing. And I think the pressure for him, was probably too high. I don't know if they've ever, said that, he had, some sort of, let's say, personality disorder, or maybe he was battling mental health issues before it became, a little bit more understandable or commonplace today. They could have probably contributed to him kind of not, seeing his full potential out. But, as far as the trade goes, it's, good for the Chargers that, the Cardinals never won any Super Bowls, in response. I mean, I think David Boston's was a, really nice, number 2 receiver for the most part in his career. And, was probably the poster boy for, HGH and other stuff back in the day. I saw his guns on Google Images. But I think, Corey Chavis, I think, was another name that was maybe a part of the package for the Cardinals through the draft. But I think he made a name for himself with the Vikings. Overall, I think, when you're dealing, that many picks, just that many options for another team, if your guy doesn't pan out, you're sweating, and we'll get into our personal sweating with the Chicago Bears and some of the things we've done pretty soon here. But I don't have much else to say. I mean, I wished Ryan Leaf, got it together somehow and maybe became a journeyman later in his career, just found like some sort of role for himself to kind of not have to live with this kind of legacy in the game. But did you have any other, additional thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, not again with respect to Andre Wadsworth, the pick from the Arizona Cardinals, but the next pick was Charles Woodson from Oakland. So
wow,
yeah. So if that occurred, then they would have hit it out of the ballpark. I actually don't know who the Cardinals had in their secondary, but I doubt they were as good as Charles Woodson. So. But they won the playoff game, so I guess that was okay for them. So, but No, yeah, I like what you were saying, I guess, with Ryan Leaf. I think I was listening to some of his stuff, his talks, kind of just, going over all of the things that he was going through. He definitely has opened up a lot more, I guess, with regards to, his process and his thought process, like as he was entering the draft, like was not prepared for anything. I think he showed up to like camp like 40 pounds overweight and all that. So really didn't was not that professional, I guess. When he was with the Chargers, didn't come prepared mentally as well. So, and it just showed there. And yeah, he was definitely, like, I guess he like self-described as like cocky basically for all that. So polar opposite of, I guess, what we see and hear from Peyton Manning, who is the consummate professional, always looking at tape, always examining everything, and obviously it showed on the field. So, but yeah, it was just kind of an unfortunate thing, I guess, with Ryan Leaf that, yeah, he has that Sam Bowie effect and all that. But glad that, I guess, sounds like he's in a better state of mind. Definitely, and thankful for that, just as another human to another human. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a good point too. You mentioned just in terms of quarterbacks or any position for that matter, when you're going about scouting, just looking at how the player's process is, just, are they the type to hit the gym early? Are they the type to be in, immaculate shape when they enter camp? Are they, always looking for that edge? I feel like that's kind of what's contributed to some of the greatest players of all time, regardless of talent or just, physical attributes. It's kind of hard to read maybe at times when you're throughout the combine or while a kid's still in college. And there's been a lot of kids with, attitudes that have ended up being some great players as well. So it's kind of like, what's the balancing act between a kid who's just going to, work hard and do it by the books, and those that just fall back on their talent, but they've just got, an edge to them,
Yeah. A quarterback is really, I think, the hardest. It certainly is like the hardest position to analyze, and it's like how much of a quarterback is, you also got to take into account scheme, the talent around them, offensive linemen, veteran wide receivers trying to help them out. Like, they have their hands on the ball all the time. They're the ones that are calling the shots, calling the audibles. So it's like there's a lot to process in there for a quarterback. So, it sounds like it's getting better, but obviously there's always going to be, it'll be interesting if there is like a certain level of like another Tom Brady that's like a 6th round pick. These days it sounds like, it's either first rounders or second rounders that are starting in the NFL these days. I know what Russell Wilson I could think about is like a 3rd rounder. But apart from that, it always seems like it's the first rounders these days, just with all the talent that they have and all the scouting that's been put around them. We were talking about some small school people with Carson Wentz. So, maybe it is a little bit better, but at the same time, it's hard. It's just hard to scout quarterbacks, I think, in general. So, but yeah.
And I think another thing to add, just as far as, quarterback and how they end up, turning out to be, the organization matters, the ownership matters, executives definitely matter. I mean, there's a difference between, the Matt Stafford that goes to Detroit and, sits in the box for, nearly a decade. And then that one season he goes to LA and he's under an offensive guru with some weapons. And it's like, hey, he found himself a Super Bowl. Like, how did that happen? So it's like, it's tough. It's tough when you're, coming out of college and, the weight is on your shoulders to be the savior, and you don't really know what kind of situation you're walking into sometimes. And sometimes it's kind of what's around you too that just helps,
totally
accelerate your downfall.
Yeah, totally. It's like, I mean, we just, we can always talk about the Packers versus the Bears, right? It's like, oh yeah, is it like 20 plus years of just watching Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre kick our butts and all that. And it's like, who's our best quarterback of all time? Jay Cutler. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, something's got to be better for their, like, yeah, how much can we blame just scouting and talent? Like, no, but like a lot of it too is organization and all that, and how their organization is structured, how they develop the quarterbacks, and then, yeah, the system around to develop those quarterbacks too. So, because, yeah, it takes a lot. So hopefully we see better days ahead, with Justin Fields. So,
Yeah, well, we're crossing our fingers. I think we both like him, which is a good thing. But one quarterback that I think we're split on, but in general situation, I think we both agree on is my final worst draft day trade. And I remember sitting there watching it and being kind of in complete disarray with what we were deciding to do tactically that day. And it ends up going that in 2017, the Bears got Mitchell Trubisky from North Carolina, and they ended up getting him in the number 2 overall slot in that year's draft in the first round. And in order to do that, they traded up literally one pick from the number 3 overall to the number 2 with the San Francisco 49ers. In return for that trade up, the San Francisco 49ers got, with the number 3 overall pick, defensive tackle Solomon Thomas. In the third round pick that they got from the Bears, it ended up being Dante Pettis at the end of the day, wide receiver Dante Pettis. With the fourth round selection that they got from the Bears in that same draft, they ended up packaging it up and moving up in the draft to trade for Reuben Foster, who was a linebacker with a lot of potential, but ultimately domestic violence kind of derailed his career and his image, and just kind of ended him prematurely. And in the next year's draft, they got an extra third rounder from the Bears that ended up producing Pro Bowler Fred Warner, linebacker who's still with the team, amazing talent. And, just kind of looking at it, I mean, we could break this down from a multitude of different angles, which we definitely will. But, for me, the first thing that stands out, and I'll kick it over to Wayne, but the first thing that stood out to me was just when we were sitting there that day, we kind of knew who the Bears were, in line for. And so did a lot of the other executives in the NFL. And just to kind of see them, drop so much more draft capital just to make that one, digit move up in the draft. It was like, I lost it. I was, scratching my head, couldn't really believe what was really going on in real time. But, what did you think about it that day? And, just with, what transferred on paper, what were you kind of thinking about, in that time, I guess?
Yeah, I like how we're talking about like it was this traumatic thing for sure. But I think I spoke before that like I liked Trubisky as the prospect. That being said, I wanted Deshaun Watson. And I thought they could have got him with the third overall pick there. So I didn't think it was necessary. To your point with regards to there, who knows exactly what would have happened if Ryan Pace just stood there at the number 3 spot. Was somebody actually moving up? Who knows? And I think that's what Ryan Pace did. Just thought like, hey, I just want to be safe. I want to get my guy Trubisky. Apparently he never had dinner with Trubisky, but never like talked really with Deshaun Watson, which I don't get. So, you talked about a person that elevated the Clemson program. They won big games. They won, I think they won a championship and all that. Trubisky, like, I think they were like 8-4 when or something close to that, like barely over 500 essentially. So, elevated it, but never really like dominated or brought them to the national spotlight there. I saw a lot of good like quarterback presence within Trubisky, made some really accurate throws, saw the mobility there. So, I would have, I guess, preferred if they were to go the Trubisky route again, which obviously I wouldn't have with Mahomes in the same draft too, but, would have traded back a little bit and got him later in the first round. If I wanted to go that route, but I was dead set on Watson. I was excited about it. But the talent I think I saw was there again, elevate the program. So I was much more about Watson, and just kind of going with him and just letting the draft come to you in that sense. So, but yeah. And then now that you mentioned all the players that we could have got into, it just hits a little bit harder. You mentioned like, Fred Warner and all that eventually. So, but yeah, it definitely was not my favorite trade during that night. Again, I wanted Deshaun Watson, but I was kind of content actually with Trubisky, and it seems like things were much more on the Nagy side, right? Than it was on Trubisky, but we'll see how he pulls things off in Pittsburgh. From everything I've heard and seen, he seems like a great person. So, we were talking about quarterbacks and organizations and how they help them out. Hopefully, he has better luck in Pittsburgh when, they had all the luck, I guess, with getting Ben Roethlisberger and having more than a decade with him at the quarterback realm. So, but yeah, what are your additional thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just some names I'm going to drop as far as in the 2017 draft that were parts of this deal that came to be. I mean, so San Francisco didn't exactly hit a home run in the trade. I mean, I think Fred Warner is a great return and that's it. But just for the amount of picks they got, I think a lot of folks were still like, San Francisco kind of, didn't really fully succeed in this because in the third round pick that they got from the Bears and they ultimately traded and, found their way to Dante Pettis, if they would have stayed in that slot and just drafted the player that fell there in that slot, it would have been Alvin Kamara. So it's, imagine Alvin Kamara now on the San Francisco 49ers. Imagine him on the Bears with Deshaun Watson or possibly Patrick Mahomes. I mean, even starting in 2017, I think we'd all be salivating right now thinking about, what our roster could be. San Francisco in that same draft ended up with, in round 5, ended up with George Kittle. So in a lot of ways, like, outside of the Bears trade that year, they still ended up with, a perennial, Pro Bowler there. So that was nice for them. But, just kind of looking down the line, and there's a good Bleacher Report article that talks about, that whole draft and the whole, Bears process with Trubisky. And, like you're saying with the Deshaun Watson, just kind of stiffing him with, no workout, didn't even want to meet him. It was just like the mindset for the Bears at that time was like, well, Jay Cutler's, the most successful quarterback we've seen, in this, franchise throughout these halls. So, let's go with the guy who kind of, fits that mold or looks that part. And I kind of feel like, I don't want to go fully, off the grid here with what I want to say, but in the same sense to kind of just like dismiss Watson's talents. And, Mahomes was kind of a gunslinger. He was kind of a Cutler type, honestly. Like you didn't really know what you were going to get, but, definitely had arm talent and things like that. So I don't feel bad because sometimes these things just pop at the right time for the right players or franchises or, that marriage or what have you. But, I kind of just looked down the first round and let's say we didn't go quarterback. We could have ended up with Leonard Fournette, Jamal Adams, Christian McCaffrey, Marshawn Lattimore, Marlon Humphrey, TJ Watt, Joe Mixon, or Dalvin Cook. I mean, if we would have ended up with really any of those guys, it would have just been like, another cornerstone on the defensive side or the offensive side. So it's just like an extra, little cherry on top. And, the last thing I'll say, at least for this trade, was just kind of seeing what we did in 17 and we walk into 18 and we get Khalil Mack, who, we were all ecstatic about. We wanted, that player, but, to give up 2 extra firsts when we'd already dished off all this other draft capital, it was like, we're doing it again and we're just not there. So, that's my piece, I'd say, but, do you have any reactions to any of that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting now what's happening, right? It's like we're kind of like comparing Ryan Poles and Ryan Pace a little bit, I guess, with like a lot of people want to just spend crazy on free agency, right? Like take advantage of that rookie quarterback contract, kind of like how Pace did that with Trubisky. It's like, okay, we got the rookie quarterback contract. Now let's get some awesome talent around everywhere. With signing Allen Robinson and then trading for Khalil Mack. It's like Ryan Poles is thinking long term. Saving that draft capital, as we were talking about before. The draft capital is really important to build a successful franchise and scouting, like foundational stuff. Get that talent, get that. I think Ryan Poles talks about like getting like essentially half a team like through the draft, like that's just quality talent all around, and then you can fill the rest of the pieces, via free agency. Like that's the game plan. So, I'm hoping that things pan out as a Bears fan, as someone that just wants a good team out there and it wants a good quarterback, and I'm really hopeful for Justin Fields. So, hopefully Bears fans just try to be patient. Let's pull through this together and all that. But yeah, I'm excited for the Bears draft overall, and yeah, hopefully things turn out better than the other Ryan.
Yeah, no, I think those are good points. And, this might be a tough upcoming season again for the Chicago Bears, kind of a building block year. But like you're saying with polls, one thing I saw was, we haven't seen a lot of activity this offseason with, dropping big money. But somebody said he's been, stashing away about $120+ million for next offseason. Yeah. So there was a slew of top name wide receivers that were, in that class. And we've just kind of seen some extensions get dropped to Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill, unfortunately. But there's still some names out there. So, have some positivity and kind of, through this year and the draft and everything else, like hopefully we're on that next, step once we get to the next off season. But I think good times are ahead for the Bears.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm very hopeful, and yeah, hopefully things pan. I'm excited for this draft that coming around and all that. We'll definitely be probably talking a little bit more about that later. But hopefully they get that. I think San Diego State punter, like in the last pick or whatever, the 6th round. But we'll see what happens there. So
it sounds good. Well, this is pretty much our episode on the positive and negative trades that we've seen in the NFL history we've covered so far in our lives. Some really great players covered here, and some huge busts, and talking about our Chicago Bears. It's still a wound that's healing slowly, but like we said, there's some good times ahead for Bears fans. So stay tuned for for more from them and more from us, because this is part 1 of a 3-part series leading into the NFL draft. Our next episode will focus on the draft coming up Thursday, April 28th. It's knocking at the door. So stay with us, keep following us, and we'll be back for more. But Wayne, do you have any parting thoughts?
Just let us know if there's anything else you want us to talk about. Feel free to either tweet us or message us on or comment on any Instagram post. Just let us know if there's any other additional things you want us to talk about, whether it be Major League Baseball, the NBA playoffs, or the NFL. So yeah, that's all.
Sounds good. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Like us on Instagram. You can find, again, our Linktree URL is in our bio. It'll take you to everywhere that we're currently located. And we just love to mix it up with you guys. So let us know if you got any trades that we missed here. Point one out for us, and we'll debate in the comments. But until next time, Wayne Pua, I'm Patrick Miller, and we're signing off for the Ball and Breakfast podcast.
Have a good day, everyone.